Okay, so I'm going to show you how to place a new wire on into a patient's brackets. This is done usually at an adjustment appointment. So this is the adjustment tray. It's purple. Every type of tray has a different color. The adjustment tray is purple. And these are the things that are going to be on the adjustment tray. So here's an intraoral mirror. This is used for seeing things inside the mouth and holding the lip and cheek back for different reasons. This is an explorer, or this is actually a scaler. A scaler has a triangle-shaped head in cross-section. An explorer would have a round or spike-shaped head. They do the same thing though. So this end is for taking the single colors off, which I'll show you here in just a second. This is for this is a band pusher, or you can use it to tuck in the end of a pigtail of a steel tie, which again I'll show you in a minute. This is called a mathau. It has a little ratcheting thing back here, so it ratchets and tightens down. Then when you go all the way, it opens up and loosens, so it kind of locks shut like that. And then to get it to open, you just continue to squeeze until it goes past. So there's two kinds of mathaus that we use. This is called an open mathau because you can see it touches here at the end but then has space back here. So that's usually what we use to put on the singles or the O-ties or chain, which I'll show you in just a second. This is called a closed mathau. It works just the same way with a little ratcheting thing on the end, but it is closed all the way from front to back, so you can see there's no gap in there. So this is good for when you're going to grab a steel tie and twist it up nice and tight. You'd use your closed mathau for that. This is called a Weingart. It's basically a fancy plier that has a little bit of an angled head. They come in various sizes and shapes, but basically this is like your utility plier. This is what you would use to put the wire in and out and to grab a hold of stuff or whatever you need. That's called a Weingart. This is a distal end cutter. So it has a little cutting blades back here. So this part, let me get you a little pointer here. So this is what cuts the wire behind the farthest back bracket. It cuts off the excess wire. And then this little thing right here grabs a hold of that wire so it doesn't go flying off. So as you grab it, that will touch, you see, and the wire will be sticking through like this. That little round bar will pinch the wire against here, and then it will cut it right there. So you reach back there and you grab it and it cuts, and then this part holds on to the part that is cut, and you can then remove that from the mouth so it doesn't like shoot off and go flying into their mouth. So this is called a distal end cutter because it cuts the distal end of the wire. Distal meaning furthest from the midline of the mouth. This is called a ligature cutter. It's basically just for cutting ligatures, which I'll show you in just a second. Or steel ties is another way of calling a ligature. So it's just like a little cutting plier for cutting ligatures. Okay, so now we're going to go over how to put an Archwire in. So first you start off by getting your Archwire out of the drawer. This is an 014 NiTi wire. This is usually the first wire that we put in when we put the braces on. So you get it lined up. They have a little midline mark, which I'll show you in just a second. But basically the first step is you get your wire out and you cut off the excess. Because I clipped this side already. You can see that the manufacturer makes them super long so that they can be as long as anyone needs. But that makes them too long for most people. So you want the wire to go all the way through the farthest back bracket, generally speaking, which in this case is the 6. So you just trim off the excess, leave them a little bit long, and then you'll do your final trim at the end. And so you trim off this much. So to do that, you get your distal end cutter, you get back here, you get a general sense for how long you want it, you pull it out of the mouth, and then you just give it a good squeeze, and that clips it, and that little thing holds on to the excess, which you then set on your tray so you don't lose that piece or get it on the floor. So then you want to slide this into the farthest back bracket on, usually that's the 6 and then the 7, and then you seat it into each of these brackets, and I'll do that real quick and then we'll be right back. So to slide it in there, sometimes you can use your fingers and put it in, sometimes you'll grab your Weingart and use that to slide it in, but you get it slid into the tubes on the 6s, and then these are open, they have slots, and you just set the wire in there. And then once you've got it in there, you want to make sure each of these wires has a little mark at the midline, so at the very center. So it's hard to see in this lighting, but the mark is right there. And it's going to be really hard to see. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Anyway, you'll just have to take my word for it. There's a little gray mark on the wire right here, and you want that mark to line up exactly with the contact between the two center incisors. Not kind of to the left or kind of to the right. You want that to line up exactly in the center, because that makes the shape of the arch perfectly uniform. If you have it off to one side, it can skew the arch, and you don't want that to happen. So that's important. You get that in there, and then you put your O-ties on. So you grab your open mouth valve, and you want to grab the O-tie by the very edge like this, not overlapping everything, but you need that lumen or the hole in the middle to be open. So you grab it like that and just pull it free. And then what you want to do is you come in here, you get it hooked onto one of the tie wings. So I find it useful to put my thumb here to hold that on, and then it's kind of a rolling motion. So you roll it back and forth to get it to go onto those tie wings like that. And then after you're all the way there, you just squeeze all the way, and that releases. And then you go to the next one. We got a bunch of singles here, so. And I got yellow, so hopefully it's a little more visible. And so you just go around and you do that. So this is a regular single, putting it on. I'll show you what a figure 8 looks like. So the idea is you want to get this wire completely touching the back of the bracket inside that slot on the mesial and the distal. This dentiform has all the teeth nice and straight, so it all lays in there nicely. In the mouth, in a patient's mouth, some of these teeth are going to be rotated, especially when we first put the braces on. And so to help that get in there really well, you'll need to do what's called a figure 8 on some of them. And so what you do for that is you'll hook it onto one of these tie wings like this, and then you pull it up and you pull it across, and see how that hooks it on both of those there, and then you rotate this one down like that. So what that does is that just made a figure 8, and that really snugs that wire in on, it makes it tighter, and so it pulls it in on the mesial and the distal really well. So the reason you want to do that is you want to get the wire touching the base of the bracket on mesial and distal, because if you don't, it won't rotate that tooth around and straighten it up. If you get that wire all the way down, say this tooth was rotated, you get it all the way in there, and then it pulls it back out nice and straight by the next appointment. So any single ties are awesome, but if something's rotated, you always want a figure 8 or steel tie, which I'll show you here in just a second. So that's how you do a figure 8. Okay, so to steel tie, you want to steel tie the wire into the bracket slot when a figure 8 is not going to be strong enough to hold it in on the mesial and the distal. So then use a steel tie. So this is what a steel tie looks like. It comes like this. And then you want to set it up like this. So you grab a hold of it right here between your fingers, and then you double these over like that. And then you pinch it so it stays put. Grab your closed mouth valve, and you grab it right there where those two overlap. Bang. So now we're like this. So then you take your thumbnail and you grab at the farthest end that you can, and you put a very slight little bend as far to the end as you can make it. Just slight like this. And then you grab right here and you put a little bend right there. So it should look like that. So then you grab it like you grab a pencil, and let's say we're going to steel tie this one. So let's say the wire touches here, but this tooth is rotated in on the distal. So what you would do is you could hold this in either with your thumb. You want to hold that wire into the base of the bracket, and you can do it either with your thumb, or you can use this on the end of your Explorer or Scaler and push it in. You just want to get it pushed all the way in there so it's touching the base of that bracket. Sorry, my focus is not awesome right there. Okay. So then once you do that, So let's say I can do it with my thumb. So I get my thumb in there. You want to get this over the tie wings like that, and then you just pull and see how that cinches up really nicely because you pre-bent it. And then you hold it in all the way on the part that is not, that needs to be activated, that needs to push it into the base of the bracket. And then you just spin this up like that. And you want to spin this up really good until it's nice and tight. So what you'll do is you'll hold this in really firmly here, and then you'll pull this way with this to kind of take up the slack, get that nice and snug, and then you spin it down to tighten that up, and then you pull again this way, pull back on that to take up any more slack, and then you spin it down really nice. And you'll spin that in there really tight, and you want it so that when you look in there, this wire is touching the base of the bracket on the mesial and the distal. And you make sure you take up all the slack, then you release this by squeezing it, and that lets go. Then you grab your lig cutter, and you want to cut the extra wire off, but don't cut it flush. Cut it maybe 2 or 3 millimeters long, about like that, and you clip it off. And then you take this pusher end of your scaler, and you want to tuck this thing. See how it's sticking out there? That's going to reef their lip hard. That's not going to be good. So you want to tuck that under the wire. So you just push it up under the wire nice and gently like that, and get it really good and up under there. And that should stay put, and that stays away from their lip. If you don't tuck it in really good, them eating and brushing and stuff can make it stand out, and then it just shreds their lip, and they come in and mom's upset, and you don't want that. So that's how you steel tie. Okay, so putting these singles on these ones back here in the back, it's easiest if you start with the hook, and you just get it hooked on there. And then again, it's all about rolling this thing over with your fingers. So I'm rolling it back and forth. If you just pull straight up and straight down, it puts a lot of pressure on the tooth, and the patient does not like that because oftentimes their teeth are quite sore from them moving. And so to be very gentle, you just get it on that hook, and then you roll it like this. So I'm rolling it to get it to go on. So you roll it around nice and gently, and then release it. And you do that all the way around. And then once you've gotten all of your single ties on, you verify that that mark is still at the midline, exactly on the midline, which it is. And then you'll reach back here in the back of the mouth. So their cheek is going to be here. You're not going to be able to see it very well. So what you'll do is you'll reach back here, you'll grab the wire gently, and then I slide the distal end cutter mesial until it touches the back of the bracket. And then I make sure I do that again. I do that twice just to make sure that I'm not grabbing a hold of the back of the bracket. If you grab a hold of the back of the bracket and go to cut, it will cinch that tube shut and it will clamp it onto the wire, and that's not good. We can fix it, but it's better to just avoid that by making sure you do not have a hold of the back of the bracket, but that you're totally out flush. And then once you're out flush, you just gently squeeze and it'll cut that off. Okay, now another thing you want to make sure of, here's the other side, so you'll do that both sides. So sometimes this tooth is going to be tipped when you go to cut it. So what you want is to make sure that this tube right here that you're going to cut, the one you're going to cut, whether it's the 7 or the 6, you want to make sure that this plier is exactly parallel with that tube. So like this. If you reach in there and cut it like this, and we're cutting a bigger wire, when you go to cut it, it puts like a torquing force on that, and it will pop the bracket off. That is not good, because then you have to put the bracket back on, and it always happens at like 5 o'clock, and then you've got to stay there for an extra 15 minutes putting that bracket back on. So you can avoid that just about every time by making sure when you cut that wire that this slot that you're going to cut on is exactly in line with this right here. So you grab a hold, you slide forward until you're flush with the back of that bracket, like that. Nice and flush. Make sure that you're parallel to that bracket slot, and then you gently squeeze, and it'll cut that off, and this should hold on to it, and then you drop it on your tray. Okay, if that shoots out and this doesn't hold on to it, you need to recover that little piece of wire if possible, because if they go out in the car and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got a loose piece of wire, again, mom doesn't like that, and it can be kind of dangerous for the patient. So just make sure you recover that loose end. And that's how you tie in your wire. Okay, so for putting chain on, we put elastic chain on when we want to close space. When there's space between the teeth, we want to pull those spaces closed. Or sometimes we'll keep chain on when there's no spaces, but we want to prevent space from opening again. So what you'll do is, if we're going to say, for example, chain the upper, what you'll do is every tooth that has a bracket and a wire through that bracket will get a link of chain. So on this situation, we have just 6 to 6 have brackets. So you'll only need 12 links of chain. If we had 7 to 7 and the wire went all the way through the 7s brackets and didn't stop at the 6, then you'd need 14 links of chain. So the ones that are in the drawer next to the chair are 12 links. If you need a 14 link, you cut that special over in the cabinet. So you grab your open mathau, and I will grab I'll grab 2 links at first, because you just hook it on the hook of the 6. And so you reach back here, and I'll usually use my thumb to help it onto that farthest back hook on the 6. And then with the 5, you get it over the post there. And then again, kind of like with a single, you'll just roll it back and forth. Let me get a little bit better hold on this. So you'll just roll it back and forth. Sometimes it's helpful to get your thumb in there to help it out, or your finger. And so then I'll grab between the 2 links, the next 2, and then you get it on that post, and you roll it back and forth. To get it to go over all 4 tie wings. So you do that all the way around. Like that, and you do that all the way around until you get back over here, and then you just hook it onto that hook on the 6, and then you're good. And again, before you let them leave, just make sure there's nothing poking or uncomfortable back here. Before the patient leaves, you always want to make sure that there's no pokey wire sticking out back here. So you have them feel it with their tongue and with their finger if they want to, whatever they want to be able to make sure that they can't feel any pokey wires. If they do feel a pokey wire, you can try to trim it again with the distal end cutter. Sometimes people are really sensitive, and you're like, you've got all that you can get with the distal end cutter, but you can still feel, they can feel a teeny little bit. So then you would take the hand piece with like a football diamond burr and just come back here and polish that totally flat. See, like right over here, we've got a tiny bit sticking out right there. So I can either try to trim that with the distal end cutter if I can. That's the easiest way, but I can't. That's as flush as it's gonna get. So if I wanna cut more of that off, I'd get the hand piece and polish that. You just wanna make sure that all irritants, like nothing's irritating them back here. Because if they can feel it at the appointment, they'll be back in 2 or 3 days with a giant sore on their cheek, and mom will be all upset. So just make sure this is nice and polished and smooth, and they can't feel any pokiness in the back before you let them leave and go home.